This was very intense, this discussion, and I would love to hear more, not only about the translation that we received, and it's quite difficult between now and lunch, and I hope Rachel and I we can manage this.
Short and sweet.
Yes, we will try to do this. So we will talk a little bit about the Publishing 2030 Accelerator, and I think this was something that was also mentioned earlier. It's about what can we do? So let's be active. How can we do something? Rachel and I, we met 2021 in Frankfurt at the IPA Sustainability Summit, and afterwards we thought about how can we do this? Yeah, so and I think it's something that we should talk about, and I think it's how at the end it's about everybody who could participate on this. And I think first of all, what happened afterwards? I think the main focus for us was the sustainability, and this was based on the 17 SDGs. And you saw this earlier, but I think it's for everybody to participate on this and also to contribute to this. So when we started with this, then you could see that it's up to you to the manifesto.
So when we met at the International Publishers Association Sustainability Summit, we had a room, it was COVID time, so it was a bit like this with about 3 people, and we were all socially distant, so we were yelling at each other, and everyone went, how important is climate? And everyone went, yeah, I'm really concerned. But it was very much from a personal perspective, and so when we walked out of the room, we went, okay, talk is cheap, we have to do something, what are we going to do? So we thought we needed a manifesto because we're fancy and it sounds awesome, but also just to move the needle a little bit. The manifesto is really about, 1, take responsibility. So I heard on the last panel, you know, we're not the enemy. So it should be easy, right? We're not cement. We don't need a technological solution in order to us to continue to exist past 2030. So it should be really easy for us to really move the needle very quickly. The second one is to drive change. The associations, so the International Publishers Association, Federation of European Publishers, national associations here in Spain, UK, Australia, and the world do an awesome job. But their job is to focus on, okay, what do my members need? How do I work with my members? What we're discussing, and you saw it on the panel, are really existential problems for the book industry. Distribution channels, how do we learn from each other? It's a global issue, it needs a global solution. So we wanted people who had the time and resources to just drive some change. The third one is to accelerate action. Again, we don't have a lot of time, and we wanted to actually deliver something really, really quickly. And we wanted to share our experience and hold each other accountable. So we wanted to forget perfect, because, you know, I come from academia. We love to talk about things. We love to make it perfect before we do anything. What we wanted to do was quick, dirty, and see if it was viable. So the Publishing 2030 Accelerator is a really great project where we said, give ourselves 1 year. Let's test those early stage ideas. And the fact is every time we get together, we have the same ideas. There was great examples of the same conversations happening in 2001, 2012, 2014. Now it's the time to really put the money where the mouth is and to actually try and do something. So the manifesto was an idea of getting everyone together and kind of just agreeing on the parameters to just do something.
I think what is important, that's what you saw earlier, so this is actually a work group, yeah, so it's a lot of different people out of the industry, across different parts of the industry, and I think we're very happy that it's heavily supported by the United Nations, because of the 17 SDGs, it's one topic, how to become carbon neutral, and you see this is across the associations, and we're also quite happy that we have the Korean Publishing Association here, because, and I think this was very nicely mentioned, we need to have a communication strategy about this, because consumers are not aware of the problem, let's call it the problem of books, yeah, so, and it's not only that it's printed on paper. So I think this is what we have here, and I think over the last couple of months, and we started with this initiative at the Future Book Forum last year in May, and it will end this year in November. So it's a dedicated time window that we were working on, and these are all the companies that are supporting us and working with us in strategies. And I think the first work stream, and you mentioned this already, it's the carbon footprint of a book.
Yeah, so also just to be really clear, what we wanted to do was to create some industry ideas that would just move everyone around. So this is not publisher specific, it's not meant to be sector specific, it's not meant to be vendor specific. This was about moving the industry and sort of giving something that would move a conversation on. So the first one, I mean, I mentioned it in my presentation before, but this was really around, okay, how do we put a label on a book and does it make any sense? And like I said, the real lesson there was that this was about transparency. You will hear time and time again about greenwashing. And so the idea that you need to unpack what we're talking about in terms of carbon impact. So it's no point saying this book is sustainable and this book is not. What we're talking about is a spectrum. And so that was when we sort of went through this. Now, it sounds really fancy, but we developed a carbon model, aka Excel spreadsheet, where you'd be able to put some stuff in and be able to look at that methodology. And we're already working with Jörg and the Eco Label to align on the methodology around that. And we've got some great players in the industry, so the international departments of Penguin Random House and Hachette, who will come together and hopefully validate that methodology. Again, that's something that could be, used in Spain, the methodology, and it depends on how that works in your market. It might be the Eco Label, it might be a leaf, it might be a QR code, whatever works within your market. But the idea is that your methodology around how you might calculate the carbon footprint of a book would be the same as what's happening in Australia, in the UK, and elsewhere as well. So we all move forward at the same pace. And what I love about this is that the people who are most excited are the ones that are not the traditional UK and US. And this is really great because you can really see that we can move forward. And it's also highlighting a couple of other lessons, like data. It's really hard to find the data for carbon methodologies. It's scattered throughout our organizations. So that's going to really give some great input into the associations to help upskill their members moving forward as well.
I think you saw this earlier, but when you look into the carbon footprint of a book, or let's look into this, and I think it was mentioned earlier today that if you would like to change something, you need to measure it. And I think that's what Rachel has created in the workstream number 1. So that's what we call it, the carbon footprint of a book, is the label. And I think it's a first step, but it's very much depending on on where the book has been printed. And I always also like this earlier slide. What is the difference between a book that is printed in Spain, in Eastern Europe, and in Asia? So that's the point. And that's what we see today. Yeah. So on the left side, the book has been produced somewhere abroad, then shipped to a warehouse, and it's more traveling books. And it's not only the production of books. And it was interesting to see also that in Spain, you think you are quite bad with regards to returns. You're not. I think this is across the countries, and also I think the responsibilities of people. They don't care about this because they don't know about it, and that's the point. So how can we make people aware that the decentralized printing, so how can we reduce the carbon footprint of a book by a kind of a publish global and print local attitude, and how can we change this? For us, and this is, I would like to make clear, this is not a Canon initiative, so it's something that we think, we see it needs to change. So, and we take responsibility and we drive this. And you saw all the companies that are supporting us, and they are helping us to drive this change because it needs to go across this industry. So what we believe on, and this is what we do in workstream number 1, we would like to develop a network of distributed printing facilities. Because we believe in books, in printed books, yeah. But at the end, it doesn't actually matter if it's printed or digitally. At the end, it needs to be around the consumer. So, what we are working on is to design a minimal viable product. So that's a test for the printing. And in our work stream, and that's what I thought I'd give you a quick update where we are with our project. So we started with 5 different work groups. Yeah, so when we started with this, we said, okay, these are the topics we need to address. And the outcome was, how can we reduce carbon footprint? And I think you saw it earlier. So we need to have data to analyze the demand. So you don't need to print always tons of books, so it's to keep them available. How can you manage this better? So print only what is needed, and then deliver it where it's needed, and as far as it's needed, and to manage the returns. And I think that's very important, and that's very critical to do this. But on the other side, and this is where Rachel and I think we are in a joint journey, is we have to make sure that the savings are visible. So how can we manage this? And this is something that I also think about. It's very important. Our vision is actually, we would like to democratize print on demand, yeah, because of, take the Penguin Random House, I think Hachette, HarperCollins, they have their network, yeah, so they work with Ingram across the world. But how can small and medium-sized publishers work on this? And I think this is the small and medium-sized publishers, they should have the opportunity to participate in this global world sales. And that's something we need to have standards, we need to set up the processes, we have to have exchange for data clear, and needs to be for all. So everybody should participate on this. So that's what we think it's a kind of a economically sustainable. So it's not only saving planets, also the diverse market in publishing we need to keep awake. And what we saw, and I think this was also addressed earlier today in our team, and I think I see Alejandro, we were talking about this, what are the target groups who we need to address? It is the publisher, because at the end, and I think that's the big difference in bananas. Yeah, when you go into a supermarket, there are bananas, there are fair trade bananas, and there are organic bananas, and you probably buy the organic bananas. But in a book, there's only one John Grisham, yeah, so you can buy it. But at the end, it's the publisher who has decided. And the book printer, he has also be aware of that the processes need to be different, and the author. And I think the author has a massive power. So how can we use this and go through the distributors and the bookshops? And I think that's a critical point. So the bookshops, they have the opportunity to go across to the readers. How can we access to the readers? And that's through the bookshops. So what our last workshop in London was, and I also wanted to share with us what is our general mission. What are we doing? So this is the workshop we did in London last month. No, it's June already, so it was in April. There is a high level of inventory, and it was addressed earlier. So, of course, there's a change. There's a problem of overstocking, yeah? Zero warehousing, that's what everybody wants to have. So, long shipment, lead times is a challenge. High efforts for single print service provider management. How can small and medium-sized publishers manage this? That's the challenge we see. Admin costs for production and distribution, and high costs for print on demand. Yeah, so I know that lots of publishers also thinking about, oh, this is the cost of a book, but in this production, like offset, it's much cheaper, so we buy cheaper. But you don't take into account the transport costs and the logistic costs that are having an impact into the carbon footprint. So. And there is no transparency of local references prices. So we're thinking about a global network. That's what we're working on. And our gains, that's what we want to have. Yeah? So we would like to give an increase of revenues for all publishers and make availability globally. Yeah? So how can we give access across the world to this and have quick responses to new trends? This was discussed this morning. It was great to see this, and I think we're all on the same page, but I think, and that's what we want to do with the Future Book Forum, and the initiative that we have raised, that started at the Future Book Forum with the Publishing 2030 Accelerator. How can we reduce these inventory costs, and how can we reduce lower emissions and have a positive image? Because that's also be clear, yeah? So we need young talent, and I think the new people that are coming now onto the job market, they're not interested in having an old-fashioned industry. Everybody thinks about, hey, what's beyond, and that's a positive image that this industry should get through this. So what are we working on? And that's what our next steps are, is we will design a white paper. Yeah, so we put all the stuff together what we created over the last couple of months. We're looking after partners. Yeah, so we are happy that the United Nations is there. We have the FEP, we have the International Publishers Association, but we also have editor. Yeah, Graham is here. Thank you for your support so far as well. But we also have Andy Hunter, because Andy Hunter from bookshop.org, he sees that there's a benefit in having access and having participation of a local bookshop in this project. What we're also thinking about, and I said this earlier, so this is not a marketing canon initiative. We would like to change something, and we're also thinking about how could we set up a B Corp organization. If you don't know what a B Corp is, that is not aiming for higher profit, so we are aiming for a strategy, we're having a vision, and we're not having the business as such in the focus. These are the 3 next steps we're working on, and I think that's one of the points. And when we presented this at the Future Book Forum, it was Richard Sharkin. He came to us and he said, it's not only the carbon footprint of a book on a label, but it's also the distribution, but it's also on the other side. And I think, Rachel, maybe you could add a sentence to this.
So I think there's a big elephant in the room, and that is because net zero is going to be driven by your finance department. Our incentives is to reduce costs and increase revenue. Hands down, that's how every organization works. We don't have a number associated with sustainability. It's not in the P&Ls, it's not in our revenues. Rudiger came up and he talked about ranking, publishing. We do it by revenue. None of it accounts for sustainability. So you are incentivized to overproduce, you're incentivized to overprint, you're incentivized to overdistribute, because it is just part of how we operate. So the final work stream is really looking at interviewing the big CFOs to really get their perspectives about how we're going to do this. Now, it's not just a publishing industry kind of challenge. We're now challenging GDP, right? We're challenging, the UN is challenging the idea of financial and accountancy. And so this work stream will also produce, hopefully, a white paper and give some recommendations about how that's going to work in practice. You know, what should we be looking at? What kind of number that is? The number of times I've talked to people about sustainability, they're like, yeah, Rachel, it's great, all warm and fuzzy, but unless you've got a cost line on my, sheet, you don't exist. That's where we need to get to, and that's the elephant in the room, and that's what we want to start the conversation around.
I think for us, and that's very important, and that's this was Peter Kraus from Clef. He was the president of the FEP until end of last year, and this was, we need to work together as an industry. Yeah, so it's something that there is a high request for changing business models. Yeah, so, and there is there's a need for print on demand, and we discussed this yesterday also here in a couple of meetings. There will be new laws, yeah, so the Accessibility Act will be there in 2025, but there are also other rules that will come, and I think we have an opportunity to do this way together, and I also like this, what he said is, we have to attract young people, and because they care for the environment. Yeah, so they have an interest in having this world for another 50 or 100 years. Probably some of us don't, but I think we have children and we have to give them this vision, and we have to be more adaptive. So this is, and what I also like very much is this, is the logo we saw earlier about printed local. Yeah, so don't underestimate the opportunities the power of the individual has, and I think we always have to keep this in mind. How can we stimulate our readers, our consumers, to act more globally? And I think until beginning of 2021, I didn't know about the 17 SDGs, but I think it has changed. But I think everybody should start working on them. Take a look at this and pick one or pick 2, and start with changing your life. Start of changing, influencing also the life of the people around you, because only together we can change this. Yeah, so that's our update on the Publishing 2030 Accelerator. The next meeting we will have in Frankfurt, and I think the white paper will be published at the Future Book Forum in November 2020, 2023, yes? And that's it. So we tried to catch up a little bit, but it was even longer than 15 minutes. Any more questions to this? Not yet. But we also have lunch, and I think the final words is to fantastic Laura. Thank you.